On Monday, September 13th, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our special school board meeting this evening. And first on the agenda, we're going to have a presentation by Dan, is it Nerad?
Nerad, yes.
Nerad, a consultant for Wisconsin Association of School Boards on strategic planning and superintendent search. Dan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and good evening. And before I begin, I do want to thank you for this opportunity to spend some time with you this evening. And more than anything, I hope you can see the way we at WSB do our work for you, with you, is we do have a framework for both the search, obviously, and strategic planning. But we're also wanting to make sure that we meet your needs. And so there can be a lot of flexibility as we would put a final plan together in both areas. So just please keep that in mind if you would. We're going to go to the second slide. Actually, we could go to the third one. If it's okay, we'll start with the search. And then I'll go through strategic planning, and I'll show you where we think there could be integration. It's not to suggest there couldn't be other areas as well. That's just a little bit to tell you who I am and what my background has been. I've been at WSB doing this work for a couple of years, about 2.5 years. And prior to that, I spent most of my career in the Green Bay schools. The last 7, I was their superintendent. And then I spent 4 years in Madison as their superintendent. And then I finished my work in Birmingham, Michigan for 6 years. And now I get a chance to continue this work in quite a bit a different way, because I don't have obviously the press of the day-to-day kind of issues as a superintendent, but yet I can remain involved with things that are important to boards of education and to superintendents. In terms of searches, in the 2.5 years I've completed searches in Lodi, Salem, Beloit, and Oconomowoc. And there's a whole mix of different districts on that list. But you know, I would certainly encourage you, if you want to learn more about the actual work, to be able to make contact with those boards of education as well. We'll go to the next slide. What I wanted to say here is we recognize that you're in a period of transition with leadership. And do know that we work to be extremely sensitive to that period of transition and trying to meet your needs. There's a lot of uncertainty. You know, the good news is you have an interim superintendent, and that helps a great deal, in this case, especially with his background. But, you know, staff have a lot of questions, and parents have a lot of questions in terms of what is this place going to look like going forward. And I just wanted you to know that we want to work with you to make sure that we're paying attention to those kinds of concerns as they exist in your transition. What I've put also in here is you do have a current mission and a current vision for yourself as a school district. And I put that in there just because this search, to whatever degree you want it to be, should be sensitive to what you're trying to accomplish for your kids on behalf of the good work that your teachers and your full staff are doing. And then finally, it's our belief that a search creates opportunities to reflect and assist in dealing with what your preferred future should be. And it's interesting because you've got 2 opportunities here through both your search and your strategic planning to be thinking about that preferred future. And the way we think about that is, yes, you need to find a superintendent for certain, but with the strategic planning, you know, there's a lot of things for school districts to choose what you want to focus on. The question is, what are your interests? What are your priorities as a school district? And we'll get to that process in a bit, but we're quite sensitive to ensuring that we're meeting your preferred future needs. In terms of our work, you know, I think you know this, but I'll just say it, is that we only place working with board superintendents in Wisconsin. And we feel we know a great deal about the Wisconsin terrain of superintendent world, superintendent life, who's out there that may be interested in positions, although I do want you to know that we do not ever create a pool, if you will. The pool varies by district in terms of the application process, but sometimes the word that's used in these circles is a stable, a superintendent stable that you create. We don't do that. So it's all about ensuring that we work to find a good number of candidates who are interested in your school district that can match your needs. We are very familiar with the search process, and we would work with you to find the right fit. I'm going to change it, put a different mask on. It's hard to talk through that one. The other thing is we do have established networks both regionally and nationally as well in terms of what the advertising process would look like. And so we certainly have a number of connections that we routinely use to reach out for candidates within the state advertising. But we also have the ability, because we're a member of a national organization called NAS, and that stands for National Association of Superintendent Searchers. And there are 37 states that are involved in that network, and they're all tied to the State School Board Association. So we also share candidate openings across all 37 of those states. And we have experience with working with all kinds of districts, and we do like to think that because of our work and our leadership experience, that we know what quality school systems do, and that we would have our eye on those kind of candidates that can deliver on what you want to have delivered for your children. And then, as I said earlier, I didn't say this, so I'll say the last point here. This is your search. And it means that we want to support you. We will support you. We'll help you through the entire process. But this is a search that we have to meet your needs. At the same time, while we have a method, if there are things that you want changed with that, we can work that out. So the next slide, and I won't spend much time on that, we are in a different time. And if there's a demand for ever doing any parts of this virtually, a need, a requirement, we can do that. And I can tell you that for my experience with the Beloit search, that was entirely virtual. And the Oconomowoc interim search was entirely virtual. So is it a preferred method? Not really. Can it be done? It absolutely can be done. And so again, that would be your choice in terms of whether or not needs change that called for doing something different. We'll go to the next slide. What this lays out is what are those search stages. And I will say that these are not atypical in terms of the steps that searchers do working with boards to find superintendent candidates. And what we would do is we actually start with a planning meeting with you. I'll explain that in more detail in a minute. But we will also post a position right away with no detail, because what we want to be able to do, if you're in agreement with our approach, is we want to do engagement to have the profile developed. So we get the news out there that there's an opening, and then we come back once we've done the focus groups and survey is what I'm proposing here, with a much more detailed profile, because that's the purpose of doing the focus groups and the survey, if you will. So engagement with stakeholders is key. We'll go to that next slide here. So we start with a planning meeting with you. I put that in a tentative schedule. None of those dates have to be the dates. It's just to show you how it could work from about mid-October to mid-February to finalize the search. We would, again, post that vacancy. We're going to work with you. We developed a recruitment brochure based on the input that we get from the focus groups and from the community survey. And then we would also work with you to develop, where do you want to advertise? Some of it's built into the contract. A lot of it's built into the contract. But if you wanted to go extra places, we can show you what those options would be. And then we also use the input from the focus groups to develop essay questions that applicants would respond to. You want to know how these candidates can write. And more important, you want to know how they think. And so those essay questions can be extremely helpful in getting information. And then, as I've already said, we place a big priority on the engagement. And in this plan, we're proposing both focus groups and a community survey. And then that's thinking ahead to where I'll stop later on, is that meeting both the needs for the search and the strategic planning. We can use both of those methods to get that same input. If you go to the next slide, we'll have an application period. We propose about 4 weeks. What we do, we collect all the information digitally. The day after the posting closes, and this may be how things vary with other groups, the day after the posting closes, each of you would receive all the applicants. And so what we do is, our approach is, we want you to see all of it. We'll come prepared. I would come prepared to say, you may want to think about this candidate this way. Here are some concerns I've heard about this candidate. But we don't want to do any pre-screening. We want you to see who all has applied. And then we'll work with you to you'll make the decisions about who you want to bring in for interviews. And so we meet with you, we review and advise the board on the applicants, you select the applicants, and that same night, we would also help you develop interview questions. WSB has a large bank of superintendent search interview questions. And those can be designed based on what you think are some of your priorities. And so we'll work with you to identify those interview questions. And so then we go through the initial stage of interview. You see all the applicants. You working with, in this case it would be me, would select the applicants for the first interview. I would contact them. I would work with you to finalize the interview questions, because they really got to reflect what you want to know from these candidates. And then I would sit in and observe the interviews and assist you with the interview process. Basically, we can go to the next slide. Basically, that same process repeats itself for the final round, and that is, I would work with you from that pool, and what we suggest in the first round is about 6 candidates. And we suggest in the second round, oftentimes called final, if you want it to be, 3 candidates. Now, I did work with a board that wanted to go to 2. And the only thing I would say to you is, you want to do that cautiously. Not that it can't be done. But if you have 2 and one gets a job elsewhere, the decision is, are you accepting this candidate or are you reopening your search? So you want to be able to kind of protect by having at least 3 in that final round, if at all possible. What we would do is, we do criminal, financial, educational background checks as part of the contract that you would have with us. We highly recommend, and we would only do it, we only recommend it be done for your finalist. Now, I worked with one board who wanted to do it on all the candidates, and that is, we recommend that the board does reference checks. The reason why we do it that way is because we want you to hear directly from people that these final candidates have worked with. We don't want to filter information, kind of based on our understanding of what a person heard. So, but we have, if that's acceptable to you and you were to choose WSB, we would work with you on how to do those in the right kind of way. We'd give you a bank of reference questions that you could ask. But we have a pretty strong belief that it works best when you get to hear it unfiltered and directly. And then I would sit in on and observe the final interviews, and many boards are coupling the final interviews with staff and community member forums. It's a great approach to get some final input. It can happen the same evening, how you rotate people through their interview. They then go to a forum and give you input on the candidates. It's nothing you would have to do, but we think it's a pretty good approach to get some additional input at the back end from your stakeholders. And then So we would assist with that. The site visit on the bottom line there is, very few boards do this, but it's an option for you. If you're down to your final candidate, and we only recommend it for the final, sometimes people want to be able to go directly see their work in the district that they're currently working. So that's an option. We haven't put it in our overall plan. And then finally, we would work with you to identify your finalists. We can work with you if you want, we don't have to, on a contract for your superintendent. We can give you input on that. Boards are, sometimes they want to deal with their own attorney, sometimes they'll work with us. It's really entirely up to you. It's not a problem either way. And then we'll go to the next slide. And then we would assist you with anything regarding introducing the new superintendent. And the right column there, not to spend too much time on it, is just a reminder, yes, we are a search firm, but WSB is more than a search firm. And so one of the things that we do include, and there's no additional fee, and we don't put it into our initial costing either, is we do offer at no additional charge about 3 months into the new superintendent's tenure. You can pick how long if you want to do this, where I would come back and facilitate a goal-setting meeting between you and your new superintendent. It's entirely up to you. Some boards opt for that. Some say we can do it on our own, and that's fine either way. But then, you know, the other list, the rest of that list is just saying we're more than just a search firm. We offer other things to school boards. And then finally, just 2 more slides. We want to work with you in a relationship-based way. And I mean, who doesn't really want to work that way? But, you know, this is going to be, if you choose WSB, again, we'd share the framework again in more detail with you. And then we can cut and paste based on what your needs are and what you want to have accomplished. The timeline is usually 3 to 5 months. That's baked into the draft timeline I gave you. Again, those dates are only dates that can show you how it could work. Those aren't hard and fast dates until you decide they're hard and fast dates if you choose us. We'll provide you support through the whole process. And the other thing that we provide districts, and this is just really an excellent tool, well, each of you would get a resource guide, really some helpful tips in here on interviews, on what kind of questions you can ask, what you can ask. The reference checking information is in here. There's just a lot of good information. Each one of you would receive one of those to help you through the process. And then I already talked about that goal setting meeting. And then if there's any other help you want, we're available to help with those kinds of things that school boards and superintendents work together on. And then finally, the last slide is we know that this is the most important task that a board faces. And we want to work with you in a way that you're as comfortable as you can be through the entire process. So it's all about developing the right kind of relationship where you can share what you're concerned about. We can problem solve together. We can work through issues together. And again, it's all about working in a relationship-based way. And there are overlap areas or potential with the strategic planning, which I'll show you at my last point in a little while. And then just to remind you, while we provide advice and counsel through the whole process, we respect the decisions are yours to make. If we see a problem with a decision you're wrestling with, I would point that out to you in fairness to you. But again, it's really important that you have a resource that's supporting you, but you're in the position of making the decisions that need to be made for your school district. So before I move on, you head to the strategic planning. You want to stop now and see if there's any questions about the search?
Anybody have anything? I think you can go ahead. Christine, go ahead.
Just a couple of questions, and they're somewhat related. What are the practices that you... Sorry, Ben's going to be mad at me. Sorry, Ben. What are the practices that you do to ensure that you have a process that is equitable that it's using really good practices for equity. And then, do you want to answer that first and then ask the second question?
I can. I think there's a couple of key intersections here, but please accept this as it's not a complete list necessarily. I think when we work together on identifying interview questions, we have to make sure that lens is a good part of the lens in looking at those questions in terms of, the kind of information you're seeking, whether or not you can ask questions ranging from what are your experience working with equity issues, all the way to things like, how do you see yourself as an equity leader? And so, that's a key place where those kinds of issues can and should be dealt with as well. I think when you screen the candidates, I think that's an important opportunity and a lens to make sure, and I think it also calls for, in that planning meeting, where you would have the applicants, is to have some discussion as a group with the board and with your superintendent about what can we do as we look at these applicants to ensure that we have a focus. And so what does that rubric look like that you would be evaluating those candidates through? And then, I would just highlight those as two very key areas. certainly, the reference checks are, it's really kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of, which superintendent candidate today isn't saying they're a collaborative leader? But, just for example, but what does that really mean? And how is that practice really shown day to day in their work? And so those reference checks, I think, are key as well.
So is there any, I appreciate a couple of things you said about, this is a process that this group uses, but it also is guided by us. So let me just share one of my concerns. One of my concerns is that when the rubric or evaluation rubric's created afterwards, it often fits the candidates that are there rather than reviewing them, like creating the rubric or evaluation tool first. Is there any movement on that as a possibility, so that, because what they find in research is people will change what you're going to use to evaluate to fit candidates versus the other way around. So is there any movement in that we can create what we're looking for, and then look at the
Absolutely.
the applicants? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's all part of the process that we
Yeah.
want to define together. And so that's a very comfortable way for me to work, is to, describe up front what are those look-fors and deal with the kind of issues that are on your mind.
Right.
And if there are differences, you work them out before you start reviewing the applicants. But clearly that can be done.
Great. And then my second question was that I know that you've done 4 searches, but I'm sure the group's done many more. That's just
Right.
based on how long you've been here. Can you tell us a little bit about the pools and the candidates, not necessarily specifics, but were they representative of districts? What kind of pool and then ultimate candidate was chosen?
It really, as I think about it, it varies quite a bit by those 4 districts. It's interesting because in Beloit, I worked with them on an interim search first, and they found a candidate who was not from the district, and then they did a full search, and they ended up selecting him as a permanent superintendent. But he clearly went through the whole process, and so he was an administrator in another Metro Milwaukee school district. A lot of good experiences in the equity area, in diversity area, not a person of color in that particular case. There were people of color in the candidate pool, but in that case there was a specific desire to reach out beyond our pretty long list of places we go to already, and they added other places, and it yielded a good number of candidates. And so that's another way, if that's of interest to the board, is to, you never know, you can't guarantee it's going to yield, but I can tell you in that case it did. Lodi search was an open search. They ended up selecting their high school principal. And I feel through the process, he earned that. I mean, there was no shortcutting of the process. There was no predetermination. In Oconomowoc, that pool wasn't the deepest for an interim. And so they ended up, near the end of the application process, an internal candidate came forward there as well. I wasn't expecting that to happen, but they wanted, for stability purposes, to be able to have someone that knew the district for the year. And so that's kind of why they went the way they did. And let's see.
You know, Dr. Nera, that's totally, thank you so much.
Sure.
I know you have a lot of talking to do, and I know that it's hard. I mean, it's hard.
Yeah,
to
okay.
ask on. So thank you so much. That was really thoughtful. And,
Okay, you're more than welcome.
And, you know, Lodi to Beloit are just 2 different districts, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Well, and my experience is in larger districts, but I'm now having the benefit of working with a lot of smaller districts. And I've learned a lot from people like yourself in terms of, you know, what the needs are and how they differ. And so, you know, my hope is that you, if you were to select us and I would be your consultant, that you would find me as a person that's very sensitive to making sure that I understand what's important to you guys. So should we go on to the strategic plan? How are we doing for time here? Okay, we're about half hour in, yeah. All right. So I can tell you on the material I gave you on the 3rd page in, strategic planning was quite down last year in terms of the work of WSB, understandably so. I mean, all of you are dealing with, you know, what are the critical issues that you need to deal with for the COVID. So in my, you know, 2+ years, I've done a strategic plan with the McGonigal board and superintendent and the Brilliant board and superintendent. That was interesting and brilliant. I thought we had a good process. They could explain to you more how they felt about it, but that was entirely virtual as well, is how that was set up. So we'll go to the next slide. And again, I'm not pushing that. I'm just saying to you, if that were to evolve, we can work to accommodate your needs. So what I want to focus on is the method that we use is called stakeholder-driven strategic planning. And that's a key way to be thinking about this process, because you'll see in a minute a slide, and I'll forecast it right now, is that yes, this is about developing your strategic plan, but it's more than that. There's opportunities to find ways to engage with stakeholders through the steering committee, a steering committee of stakeholders, through a community survey, through focus groups, to be able to listen to them about what they think is important for their children within the community, and for you as a steering committee to wrestle with how do you address those needs and which of them can be addressed. So we very much use, it's adapted, it's not one for one, but we use stakeholder-driven strategic planning and education, and the author is Robert Huey. And a lot of the work comes out of the quality movement, you know, quality organizational tools. We'll go to the next slide. This one also helps address kind of why this work is important, and I understand that you would have some understanding of this. But what we want to be able to do through this process, working with you in the steering committee, is to create a long-range mission, a moral imperative. That's a new piece, by the way, and that doesn't come out of Huey's work. It comes out of some new work that has been defined by Michael Fullen and the former, now retired, John Ashley, executive director in California. They wrote a book called The Governance Core, and they really press on you need to define your moral imperative for children. So we would propose baking that into the process. So long-range mission, moral imperative, vision and goals, and strategies is what's all the parts of a strategic planning process. And so I do want to go back to one point. While I've done 2 with WSB facilitating, you know, my whole career as a superintendent is filled with working with strategic planning over a lot of different years. So I have kind of the sitting in the chair perspective as well with that. So the plan that would be developed focuses equally on the what, and that is kind of the purpose, the vision, mission, moral imperative, and the direction, the mission for the school district, and then the how. What are your goals and strategies? So if you want to kind of slice this in, put this all together in a recipe, that's really all of what this is composed to do. It's the what and the how. And also, the stakeholders can be of great help in this process because they come with their own understandings and insights. They work with you to address the future, and they react to your possibilities and realities. And it's been a good conversation as we've worked with those steering committees. So the next slide, please. What we would work with you on is to seek representation of various stakeholders within the community. You would select a steering committee. You'll see in the PowerPoint there's some representative groups that you could sample from to make sure you're covering a variety of stakeholder groups. And then there's board and administrative leadership. We are strong believers, and it ties to my recommendation for you to think about if you choose WSB, about we are very strong about board involvement with strategic planning, that you would serve as members of the steering committee. So you'll see kind of a related concern when I get into that relationship between strategic planning and the superintendent search. And the superintendent's involved, and the position that we have on that is the superintendent needs to be an active participant, just like board members are, but they're a participant in the whole process. Certainly entering their own views about what's important for children, their experiences about what they see as priority needs for the district. And what we would create through this work is a district plan, and we would help guide that process. So we'll go to the next slide. That's that slide I forecast. Yes, this is a plan, but it's also an opportunity to engage with your stakeholders about the education for your children, looking forward. This next slide shows another key why, and that is at the center of this key work of school boards, which is from the National School Board Association. At the center of this is the key why around developing a strategic plan is to what do you want to accomplish for your kids in their learning and their development. That's why that's in the center. And what is recognized on the outside are 5 key roles that board members play that are actually key parts of either the development of a strategic plan or what happens after you have a strategic plan. What do you do as a board? So I won't highlight any of those tonight. We'll go to the next slide. All that slide does is it show a beginning and end of a process. What we would want you to do is we'd want you to think, yes, you have a plan, but what our urging is how you live your plan, whether or not your plan was properly, rightfully developed. I mean, you can get people all engaged in this work, but if you don't have a process to live it and to monitor it and to know, has it made a difference for your kids, it really, I'll state it a little bit more strongly than need be, it's really questionable about whether or not you should engage in the process. I just make that point to know that it's an important one to think about. Yes, you have your plan. How are you going to live into it? We'll go to the next slide. So yeah, we have a community involvement part of the process. There's that steering committee. We would recommend surveying the community, which is a standard part of our strategic planning process. And then we would also use the focus groups that are put together for the search we would propose, also to get the same kind of information out of the focus groups of what people are thinking about priority areas of focus for the school district. So we use both, I'm proposing, use both of those processes to get good input for both needs. We look at a 2 to 6 month planning process. That can be flexible. You'll see that we recommend 6 to 7 meetings. I put that on there, and I'll show you an outline in a minute that shows what happens in 6 meetings, because we don't want you to ever feel that this is a commitment that you make for your lifetime if you get involved with strategic planning. It has a rightful beginning and it has a rightful end, and we can figure out how many months it will take to get through those 6 meetings. And then they're about 2 to 3 hours each about. And then again, we use that Robert Ewing method in the large part for strategic planning, and it allows you to create a plan for the next 3 to 5 years for you to focus on. The next slide talks about the steering committee. And so I've already pointed out it's our belief that board should be involved, superintendent, staff need to be involved, and then I'd work with you to develop that steering committee to ensure that you had representation from various groups. And here again, we highlight the survey of citizens is a foundational component of the planning process. And again, we're also going to use the focus groups from the search we would propose to get your additional input. The next 2 slides, I'm not going to spend any time on them, but what they are is Robert Ewing has identified different sections of the community that you should be thinking about in terms of forming a steering committee. So do you have people that represent health and safety? Do you have people that represent, the financial and business world? And then the next slide shows 3 other areas. And again, that's just a tool to help you make sure that you have good representation should you want to use this method for strategic planning. We'll go to the next slide then. This is again about that survey. You want broad-based community input. It works easy. We would work with you to finalize a survey. We have a comprehensive survey. You can add things. I'm already proposing that you add things for the superintendent search on there. We would provide the district a link, and then you would send that out to whoever you could wide to get that input. It would come back to WSB. We would compile a report for you, is how that would work. And the purpose there is to identify key issues, educational issues, that they want you to consider addressing. This next slide, I'm not going to spend any time on it other than to tell you, we would take the data from that survey and put them in Pareto charts. The easiest way to think about it, and we would do that work with you, is you can't focus on everything. And this is a method, a statistical method to help you see where the priorities lie. And it's where kind of the intersection between the bar graph and the line graph. And again, all I'm trying to say to you is, in this world, people expect a lot of you. So how do you narrow your focus? This is one way to do that, and to have it with some degree of objectivity. And then other key parts of the process, we built right into the front of this, and typically we ask the superintendent to work with staff to put this together. It's a presentation of district data. So, there's a lot of inputs that you need to provide your steering committee. One of them is the community survey. What's that showing? The next one is, what is the district data? Kids and learning, you can address if there are prominent building data that you have, facility, you can decide what that data looks like. And then the steering committee would also do an important input activity. There's another method that's oftentimes you call SWOT analysis. That stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've kind of turned that around a little bit with a little bit more of a positive orientation. And so the steering committee, and again, if you selected us, I would facilitate that with you, is that you would identify strengths, opportunities, what you aspire to be, and what are your current results that should either help you know whether or not it's an area for focus or you're doing pretty well here, if you will. So we would do that SOAR analysis. We also have a session that focuses on vision, mission, and then we would add the moral imperative into that. And then there's a place to intersect with the superintendent search, and that's through the focus groups. And then here's how this all comes together then, or could come together, is that after all those sources of input, the senior leadership team would develop a draft strategic plan. You cannot write these we don't believe you can write these as a full group of 30 people. And so they would develop the initial document based on the input that's been provided. And that would be reviewed and approved by the steering committee. Then we ask the Board of Education, once it clears the steering committee, to approve the plan. So you would have another role to play after the plan was finalized. And then this gets into, so what after you, so you have a plan now, then what do you do? Is that we suggest ongoing monitoring. We have some methods we can tell you how to do that through board meetings, monitoring the progress with the plan. You don't want to just create it and have a perception, even if it's just perception, that the work is being ignored. So we have ideas for you to think about for that. And then we recommend an annual review, and many groups bring back the steering committee for an update. You wouldn't necessarily have to do it that way, but there's a way to kind of keep this life, going in terms of people interested in what's going on in the district. And then we also believe that goals should be established, tied to the strategic plan, and you certainly, if you go that route, you want to publish those annually and how well you're doing. And then this is the next slide is those 6 meetings, how it all pieces together to be able just to show you that we can work through this in a number of meetings, and it's not a forever and ever kind of process. We'll go to the next slide. Here I lay out board member roles are key to the success, and I'll just emphasize a couple of things, and that is, so you're in the room and yet you have to approve the plan later on. How is that done? Well, you want to be an active participant is our encouragement. You don't want to dominate because you want to encourage people to come with their ideas and not feel they have to screen them through, what they believe is going to be acceptable or not acceptable. But I've also encouraged boards that if you have concerns along the way, express them while the process is going on. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to create surprises as you're trying to get engagement and enthusiasm, build trust around this process. Express what your concerns are as they go, because I think it's always better to lay that out well in advance. The next slide is another method to look at. Once you have the plan on the far right, then you start implementing. It's a plan, do, study, act method for ongoing work with a strategic plan. I'm just saying to you is, again, reinforcing, you want to create it, you want it to be good for kids, you want it to live within your governance work. This next is an example of how you can monitor strategic planning on an ongoing basis. I won't get into the details of that, but there are tools that can be provided that can help you monitor. The next slide is we give you a number of districts that have strategic plans, and I think I'll stop with that so I can build some time in for that overlap between the two processes. Do you want me to check on questions for now on strategic planning?
Sure. Anybody? Got anything? Appears not right now.
Okay, that good. Thank you. I'm going to give you a handout, and I'll walk you through it real quickly. Can you help me with that, Wayne? It's 2 pages. So what I put together, kind of thinking you might have a question about how do these two interface and where they should not interface. Let me just say this, please understand, these are my perspectives as a WSD consultant. There may be other perspectives, and I may not necessarily have captured everything that's on other people's minds, but I try to think through where are the places where there's overlap and where should not there be overlap. So if you just want to go down the list, and I'll just go through this document real quickly. We use a community survey for strategic planning and a focus groups for the superintendent search. We build into our superintendent search proposal, by the way, 5 focus groups. That more can be added. I can also tell you that the way WSB works is, let's say you decided, I'm making up a number, I'm only doing 2. We only bill you for hours that we perform. And so what we do is we actually put on a spreadsheet everything that we're going to do, and how many focus groups, how long do we need to spend on the community survey? So that's how we estimate it. But we think with those two areas of input, the community survey and the focus groups, each of those could be easily modified to ask questions about the other process. So you're collecting input about both at the same time. And that is front-end activity for the strategic planning process and for the superintendent search. So I would ask you to think that that's a clear area of possibilities. Then activities that could occur prior to the selection of the superintendent was, again, reinforcing that the community survey and the focus groups could be done before the selection. You could also identify the steering committee, you know, who might be members on the steering committee. I'm suggesting you could have an initial meeting of that steering committee just to lay out the planning process, just to get people kind of engaged and excited about the process. And then the district staff under superintendent leadership, because that's typically how it's done, could develop the district data report. And then, because that's a key foundational presentation to the strategic planning committee, if you wanted to wait till you had your superintendent, you could wait on that. But I'm saying that that's an area that could be accommodated. Then I get into a couple areas that my advice would be to wait. But I'm saying to you, these are my ideas. If you chose us, I would work with you to meet your needs in any way that you felt these didn't. And if I felt I had a concern about something in doing it, that I would share that with you, obviously. So what I'm saying here is, beyond the potential of holding that first meeting, I propose that the remaining strategic planning meetings could wait until the selection of a superintendent. And so when you look at that superintendent search timeline, which is something that would only be finished if you selected us and we worked together on that timeline, I'm proposing that your superintendent search would end about mid-February, mid to the end of February. You could begin, if the superintendent you selected in particular was available to attend these meetings, you could begin that work then, or you could decide to wait to another time. So I provide you two reasons, from my perspective, why the waiting, if you will, if that's the right way to describe it. In both if you go to the second page, both in the search and in the strategic planning process, the board is heavily involved. So in addition to your regular work, and again, it may not be appropriate that I worry about this for you, but I'm just telling you, I've worked with boards. I've tried to make sure that they felt that they were in a steady state as much as could be with their work. It may be a bit too much to add both the superintendent search and the strategic planning, because I'm suggesting our method would be to have you at every one of the strategic planning meetings as well. Now, again, this is all subjective. Different opinions should be honored as well. The other thing is point number 2. Your superintendent that you select needs to provide ongoing leadership and direction for the strategic plan. And so I believe to do this work most effectively, the superintendent should be involved as the plan is being developed to whatever extent possible. And the key there is, number one, it creates opportunities for that new superintendent to meet the community and to work with you as that person is meeting the community. Also to be able to hear what the input is from key stakeholders. And then also, I'm biased by the view that you're hiring this person because this person has ideas that you think are important, and you want to make sure that there's appropriate voice in the process for that superintendent to be able to weigh in. So I think you could accomplish both for the most part next school year. I'm just suggesting some staggering of things, if you will. So again, it's arguable, but those are my perspectives on that issue. So I'll stop, and that's all I have to present.
I just have a question. Have you ever done the other way? Where you've done the strategic plan first as kind of, in some ways, a template or a parameter, what you're looking for a superintendent, and allowing the person to kind of say why they feel they would fit that
Yeah.
parameter, those parameters.
I've checked with other consultants at WSB. This is the first experience, and again, some people have retired and moved on, so I didn't check with all those people. This is the first experience where both have been looked at the same time that we can recall.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it is arguable what I said. I mean, there are different perspectives on it. I just think that at the end, maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm concerned about the burden of your time with both processes very intense, plus everything else you do every month. And then the other thing is, I just think the superintendent that you select is being selected for their ideas in good part, and you want them to have an opportunity to express them. And maybe maybe at the end of the day, and maybe this could go without being expressed, but I'm going to express it to you, is I would prefer, if this was me being selected, to have some voice about something that I'm going to have to dedicate my next 3 to 5 years to. Not that I'm saying there's anything I would disagree with, but it's important to bring that person along in those conversations. So I know that's a little long-winded for your question, but I don't have a good actual case to be able to share with you how it's worked. You know,
Anyone else have anything for the good doctor? I guess not.
well, thank you very, very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wish you the best in the important work that you're doing, and good luck. As I always
Thank you very
say,
much.
you know, you can always rely on luck, but you don't want to fully rely on luck, right?
We prefer not.
But good luck,
Thank you.
and thanks for your time.
Yep, have a nice night.
Yep, you too. And Angie, thank you for your help.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
I'm out of here in a minute.
you bet.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, thank you. Be well, everyone.
Thank you, you as
Thank you
well.
so much.
Drive carefully.
Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay. So next up, we have some consent agenda items, along with some co-curricular staffing recommendations. And I would look for a motion to approve those recommendations.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Kate. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Christine. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We've also got some personnel items not necessary for vote. And that would move us into our discussion items. And first up is an update on how the district is connecting with virtual and homeschool families for the 2021-2022 school year. I would
There's
turn-
Lauren, all ready for
Turn this
you.
over to Lauren. Thank you. Lauren, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. So our communication, as you know, we hired 2 school counselors at the end of,
I can't.
can you hear me, Craig?
Now I can.
Great. All right, so at the end of last school year, we hired 2 school counselors, one at our K-5 level and then another one at our 6-8 level, and then did a little bit of internal restructuring for the high school. So really, we have one school counselor, K-5, that is helping to support our homeschool and resident WEVA families, and a school counselor at 6-8, and then our social worker at the high school is supporting those families. And so what our process has been is we have reached out to all of the families that we know of that are homeschooling or are attending WEVA and our residents, and have asked them if they would like to receive all of our district level communication and the building level communication of where their child is at. And so based on their response, we've either been able to kind of partially enroll them so that they can get our communication, or they've said, no, thank you. And we have kind of gone on our way and told them, if you need anything from us, please let us know. And so at our K-5 level, we have around 31 students that are either homeschooled or attending WEVA. At our 6-8 level, we have 3 students, and at our high school level, we have 2 students. 12 students at our high school level. And so each of our counselors and then our social worker have been reaching out to these families just to make a connection, and then I think our K-5, we will do a little bit more where our school counselor will reach out to those families and provide kind of monthly updates on what is happening within our buildings on top of what they're getting. And I always say, like, if there is someone you know that is not receiving our communication, that is either homeschooled or a resident attending WEVA or a different virtual school, let me know. We can get them on the list. Some of our families who are homeschooled have always homeschooled their children, and so we don't have a lot of contact information for them because of that. So if any of you hear of someone not receiving our communication, please direct them to me and we will get them set up. Any questions on that for me?
Lauren, just a clarification question. The numbers that you provided, are those the ones who are taking up the services or the total?
Total.
Total, thank you. About how many are taking up the services?
At our K-5 level, it is about half of that. I could give you, it is about 15 to 17 at our K-5. I want to say 2 at our middle school, and then under 5 for our high school.
Thank you.
And what was the total number for the middle school, or 6-8?
3.
3, okay.
Anybody else have any questions for Lauren? Okay, thank you very much, Lauren. Appreciate it very much. Moving on, our own Dr. Pribanow will give us an update on our WEVA, Four Lakes, and Destination Career Academy and Insight Schools for the year.
Great, thanks, Craig. I just thought this would be a nice addition to just checking in with the families who are virtual or homeschooling right now. So I've been sitting in on the monthly meetings of the Four Lakes Education, Inc. Board meetings. They're responsible for Wisconsin Virtual Academy, as you know, Destinations Career Academy, and Insight School of Wisconsin. And a couple of things that were just recently presented at our last board meeting, which was late August, was enrollment. And so I thought I'd share that in October of 2020, which you'll see in a minute, it makes sense. The total enrollment was 3,993, so almost 4,000 kids. As of August 24th this year, enrollment's around 2,715. Now that may change in the next 2 months. In October, we'll have the official numbers, but you can see the difference of about 1,200 students. And that really was only seen in WEVA. When you look at the years previous, DCA and Insight were almost exactly the same numbers. So it really was the increase at WEVA. Dr. Cutler, Sarah Cutler, is the new head of school. She presented to us about some of what they're trying to do with what we might call student support. They've completely changed the way they talk about this. Rather, they're calling it student engagement, having much more focus on individual learning plans, setting goals as individuals, as well as having regional events, in-person events, to get people more engaged, to get the students more engaged. So they're, once again, setting academic and social emotional goals with each student. They've hired an elementary engagement mentor, 2 middle school engagement mentors, and 4 high school engagement mentors. So they'll be doing more work with that. And some of the activities that they're doing, I didn't want to share all of them, but just a couple of them. They have a number of outings where they do picnics, or they go to orchards, they do library days, sledding, and so on. They have different event committees that plan different events. They have a number of new student clubs. So just really trying to reach out a little bit better for the students themselves. So that was the second update. And the third one that I just wanted to share was, as you know, Dr. Scott Brown is working on our 5-year review of the virtual academies. And he's been working very closely with Dr. Cutler. And she's just been really responsive, a really great connection. And she's been very responsive to comments that we've been receiving. And then I check in with him every other week or so, and he's just kind of in the beginning stages of that. So we're going to continue to have our finger on the pulse of what's going on, but certainly if there's any families on who are listening, to continue to share information, and that we're happy to share that with WEVA and DCA or Insight or wherever your kids are going. So, any questions? I just thought it'd be nice to kind of hear a little
Absolutely.
bit about them and some new things they're doing.
Well,
So thanks for the time.
You know, WEVA kind of took a beating all year last year, and, you know, we're really hoping that, based on those experiences, that they've made the appropriate hires and improvements so that, you know, a lot of the issues that popped up last year.
Well, it wasn't their fault either.
Oh, no, not at all.
This stuff came on, and who would have known you'd have to have.
What was their increase in enrollment
Yeah,
last year?
it's
Something
just-
like
About almost 1,300.
1,300,
Yeah,
so,
you know.
yeah, that's a heck of an influx of
Right.
students all at once. Anybody else got anything? We move on? Okay. Next is discussion and possible action on COVID-19 protocols.
Okay, one of the things that we said when we put the back-to-school protocols in place was that we'd review them each month in case there's any potential changes. The, obviously, discussion that has probably generated the most emails, at least to me, would be lunchroom. And I have been in each of the lunchrooms, watched lunches to try to determine, you know, if there's something we could do. And just the truth was, there is no feasible way that I can get 6 feet of distance between students at our lunch periods, unless there would be a dramatic change. I mean, what I mean by that is, if we were to take the gymnasiums away, basically for half a day, so we set the gymnasiums up as an alternate cafeteria, so we had, you know, we brought in desks or tables of some type, and we basically were to use our cafeterias, we could probably get pretty close to 6 feet, but then you've basically taken the gyms out of
Yep.
commission for at least half a day. Because it's gonna take at least an hour to set up. It's gonna take, we have 3 lunch periods during the day and at least an hour to tear down. So, I mean, so when I say, you know, nothing's ever impossible. Everything is possible if you know, it's the willing to do the primers. Now, I know that we tried to make this year back to as normal as possible, which means having phy-ed classes, you know, either inside or in the gym, depending, because you can't depend on things outside because they're weather dependent. Like, when I came to work this morning, it wasn't raining, but when I saw other people come to work this morning, it was a downpour. So, you know, saying, well, we'll do it outside, we can during the weather, nice weather, but eventually the weather won't cooperate for us to do that. So I think we've tried to space them apart as much as feasible. When I get emails that said all the other schools are doing this, the bottom line is all the other schools are pretty much doing exactly what we're doing, because we talk with them every week to determine, to try to get ideas from one another. What are you doing, you know, and if you're doing something, what is it that we could do? If we ate in the classrooms, we won't have 6 foot of distance between them en masse in the classroom. So, and that would take, then that teacher would not basically have a duty-free lunch because they'd have to be watching the kids in the lunchroom. So,
And I could add that I've visited 3 of the 4 schools myself during lunch hours. I was set to do all 4, but I had a family emergency, so Greg and I are gonna schedule something for this week, but I can concur that given the circumstance, given the space available, I think the building principals are doing as good a job as they possibly can to get these kids through. I spent an entire grade levels lunch hour with Corey at Wabisa. Timed the line through, timed while kids were sitting to lunch. As soon as the kids finish their lunch, the mask goes back up, their hand goes up, and they're excused and they go outside. And given the fact that you've got a line for hot lunch, about the time the last kids in the line are getting their lunch, the first few kids are through with theirs and they've moved on out. And based on some timing that I did, and Corey, you can correct me if I'm mistaken, I didn't see a single person that was within 3 feet of another person for longer than 10 minutes. If the number is 15 minutes for 2 people unmasked to be, within a certain distance of each other, they beat that time. There were no kids that were sitting close to each other inside for more than 10 minutes. They were all less than 15. Then when they all went outside, then the mask could come off.
And we have looked at some ways to not get 6 feet, but to get increased ones at both Conrad Delvium and Wabisa. But basically requires hiring additional staff, so we even actually posted. But the bottom line is we have no takers. Now, obviously, you're looking for someone for several hours per day, so it's not a full-time job. But so we could what basically is at Conrad Delvium is to adopt a little bit like the middle school model, let half the kids go out to recess while the other half eat, and then switch. But even the middle school, which has the closest to 6 feet, they have an overflow outside, and they're not apart 6 feet outside. Then they're
Maybe
sitting at the
3
normal
feet.
tables outside. And that is only if it's nice. If it's not nice, then of course that overflow. High school lets people go outside, and it's a lot more movement. At Wabisa, we're trying to take a look at using half of a gym and setting up with supervisors. And that's just, so it's not that we're not looking at ways to increase the space. It's just that I think for the resources and space we have now, we're doing the best job that we can.
And another thing that I failed to mention is that each kid sits in the same seat, same assigned seat each day for, the close contact and that sort of thing. So they're paying very strict attention to that. There was at least 4 or 5, it seems to me, staff members helping the kids get through their lunch, keep them moving, keep everything going, in a nice flow. And personally, I thought, like I said, given the circumstances and the limited space we have, I think they're doing as good a job as could be expected.
So I don't have any recommended changes at this point.
There was a couple letters talking about, some parents asking, could they volunteer? Is that something we should encourage, or?
Well, we aren't really letting visitors in.
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
Yeah.
I mean.
It would have to be done in some sort of an official manner, I would think, through our HR folks, I would think, to at least.
Yeah.
Well, the issue with, if you have volunteers coming in, and, they'll come in as they can, what happens if they happen to bring it in? They're the individual who brings it in from the school, because, we're not testing those. They might be vaccinated. I think, I like to believe that the majority of individuals that are able to get the vaccine, have probably taken it. But I think right now, since we're not letting visitors in, we have encouraged some of the people that said they volunteer, would you like to be hired, to be an employee? That hasn't been successful yet.
You might, and another issue that has come up a little bit, but it will probably come up more over time, is the co-curricular spectator issues. I know last year that in the Rock Valley the schools in the Rock Valley were located in 5 different counties. So obviously that caused, some issues in terms of what the recommendations or requirements were from one county to the next. Now, our conference has changed slightly from last year, and I know Edgewood has been added and Monroe's been added. I think Edgewood would be the second school in Dane County out of, McFarland last year was the only school in Dane County from the Rock Valley Conference. The other schools had less restrictive rules in terms of spectator masking and those sorts of things at both indoor and outdoor events. So that creates, sometimes the McFarland folks will travel 20 minutes down the road and watch a volleyball match unmasked, and then come back here the following, week, and maybe even play the same team again, yet the Dane County rules need to be abided by here.
Yeah, the one thing that we just had a meeting on with the Rock Valley superintendents, because the one issue we were running into that we did reach consensus on was that on contract tracing. Because some, if we do positive, we do contact tracing and those individuals do not play. There are a few schools that don't do contact tracing. So they let them play. If a person tests positive, they can't, but anybody they were around, they let play. And it was determined that that was not acceptable.
They've had to cancel contests, I believe.
Yeah, so what we've done now is if someone tests positive and there's, the athletic directors have to talk. If it's determined that they don't contact trace, the schools do not have to play, and they will reschedule at a later date, when their team might
If
be healthier.
possible.
Now, it may be that, you can still play, but those people that would be close contacts cannot participate, so. But that was agreed upon. What the other thing that was agreed upon, as you were mentioning, is that you abide by the rules of the school you're going to.
Yes.
So for masking, if people come here, everybody has to mask up. If we go there, we'll abide by the rules that they have,
And has that been working so far?
so far.
Okay.
But I mean,
Good.
there are complaints. I mean,
Yeah.
one that, like Craig mentioned is that you can go and all of a sudden you don't have to wear a mask. Then you come back here and you have to wear a mask, and it's very short distance in between. So you think, why are we being more stringent than they are? Well, one is, we're in Dane County, and Dane County has a mask mandate.
You really don't have to say much more.
No.
So anyway, we agreed we would go over these each time. I think we will continue to go over, and if there's ways that we can make adjustments to be better, we will. At this time, I don't know any that I would recommend.
Okay. All right.
Can I just ask a quick
Yeah,
clarifying
absolutely.
question? Thanks so much, Craig, for doing some observations
I
and
agree.
data collection for us. It sounds like, so if you were at Wabisa, for example, it sounds like the kids have different places where they sit. So are they also kind of staggering classes so that they're not
Grades.
grades?
They'll do half the grade will be in the cafeteria
Mhm.
with lunch, and then some will be outside. And no, actually, that's not true. Corey, again. Actually, Corey, you're here. Why don't you explain the process to me? Or clarify
so
for us.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. So what we do is we have each grade level in the lunchroom at one time. So we don't have any of the half and half like I think the middle school has, where some of the kids are going outside first and some of the kids are inside. So all of the students come in, but what Craig was talking about was just the kind of the efficiency of the kids coming through the lunch line, and with the speed at which kids are eating, because of course while kids are standing in the lunch line for hot lunch, we have I'd say approximately about 20 to 30% of our students who are eating cold lunch. So those students are already finishing up. So I have not had a day, and again, it's only been day, 8 or 9, that we've not had any point where let's just say for our third grade, where 160 kids are all sitting down together at one time, because there's just a lot of either kids are standing in line, coming to sit down, or students are already going out. So does that help with your question, Christine?
Yep, no, that's perfect. It's,
Okay.
you know, I think all of us, or at least I haven't been in Wabisa for a little while, you know, what, you just picture everyone sitting there, you know, so it's really helpful to hear that there's this natural flow and rotation that happens just by virtue of, like you said, who's eating cold lunch, who's eating hot lunch, how quickly they eat, and so on. So, yeah, it's perfect. And I would be, oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, and some additional spreading out of, I mean, we're trying to maximize putting tables out to the far extreme. You know, the structure doesn't look the same way as it looked 2 years ago when we were pre-COVID. Also, some of our practices in the past, we used to not have assigned seating, which was a big deal for our kids coming to Wabisa. They would come, and that was a huge sense of independence. It was that, oh, they get to choose where they want to sit. But we're of course, for good reason, we're doing assigned seating. And the other, again, it seems like a small thing, but it does help a lot, where tables used to be dismissed at one time. And our practice right now is, as soon as the students are done, and they're very good, they know, they give a thumbs up when they're ready to go outside. So we're not dismissing a whole table, we're dismissing every student. So as soon as they're finished eating, they let us know, mask up, thumbs up, mask up, and out they go. So it's pretty efficient, and I welcome anyone to come on over if you'd like to take a look.
Would it be okay, Greg, I know that you haven't done the data analysis or the data observations for Greg. Greg, how's it going for you? Or do you feel like there's some of this kind of natural, I don't even know how to describe it, where it's not everyone is at the same time?
Hey, Christine, were you saying Greg or Craig? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was saying you, Greg. We wanted to see
Oh,
you.
sure.
And I know
Okay.
I'm putting you on the spot, but can you just kind of describe how it's going? Because as you know, we've been getting a lot of letters.
Yes, it is similar at CEPS. Like at Wabisa, each grade level eats at the same time. With the classes coming through in the grade level, again, similar to Wabisa, we have the practice where the first class of students that are sitting down, they're going to be the first students that are dismissed. So the difference is at CPS, they are dismissed by classroom just because of the supervision needs for our younger students. But the supervisors, as of this week, even they're keeping track of which students are first, second, third, fourth, fifth into the cafeteria. Then we're dismissing in that order. Similar to Wabisa though, there has not been a time in any of our 3 lunches where all of the students are completely unmasked, all eating at the same time, because of that kind of natural progression like you described, Christine, where first class is in, they're sitting down and eating, they're finishing up, the other classes are going through the lines. It's really an efficient process, and that's thanks in large part to the supervisors that are in there, the food service staff that are quickly getting the kids through. We have 2 lines that the kids are continually going through for the hot lunch school, the hot school lunches as well. So it is a really efficient process. We keep the assigned seats. Kids know where they sit. It's week 3, but even our kindergartners know exactly where to go. They get right down to business. They do a good job putting their mask back on when they're done eating, mask back on when they need to get up and get a utensil or condiment or use the bathroom, etc. And another similarity to Wabisa, they're not spending, in general, of course, there's always exceptions, but in general, they're not spending 15 minutes eating. I think part of that is because we have what we call our full reopen schedule with recess after lunch. Kids are hungry, so they eat their food, but they also want to get out to recess too. So it's overall a pretty slick and efficient process, but of course, for transparency's sake, yes, it is by grade level. The kids are all in there, but with all the routines and procedures that the kids are doing, the supervisors are supporting, they're in and out. And, it like Dr. Anderson said, everyone's doing as best as they can with that process.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Of course,
Anybody
you're
else?
welcome.
No.
Bruce, Arlen, anybody? No? Okay. Okay, so next we have discussion and possible action on entering into a contract for strategic planning and superintendent search.
I think we need to, oh, never mind, you don't need to make a motion. Well, you do if you,
If we should decide to.
if you decide to go with the group, you would.
Who wants to start? Feelings, comments, concerns? What are we thinking here? Let's have some discussion. Okay?
I got a question.
Go ahead, Arlen.
What does Wayne got to offer?
I could
Well,
answer that.
actually, I mean, I've known all the presenters. There's nothing that we can't do in-house that they can do. I mean, as Dr. Neeraj just said, you know, the way you combine the processes when you meet with groups of people, and that's the whole key, is you need to you need to do lots of listening. So you need to then take what you hear and then you know, basically synthesize it down into your end products. When you meet with staff members, you can ask them questions about the superintendent search. You can ask them questions about strategic planning, what they would like to see in the district at the same time. You don't have to have two separate meetings. You already have administrators within the district who have relationships with the staff members, so getting that input, I think you'd be able to get that quite easily from the members you already have. It does require a lot of time. I mean, what both of them is that these are major board activities.
Excuse me for interrupting, I was a bit taken aback when he said we're the first district to ever come to them thinking we wanted to do these two.
You know what, and a lot of it, I think, for that is the philosophy of, do you want a superintendent who's going to lead you in the process? If so, then of course you're gonna wanna hire a new superintendent. Or do you want to determine where it is you want the district to go and then find somebody to lead you in that direction? I mean, it's just different philosophies.
I think there's a third, though. Sorry, John. The third would be not leading us in the process, but coming with us in the process. So I actually feel like there's a middle. It's not an either or. And that's probably where I would fall, is I'm more comfortable that I don't think a new superintendent would be able to lead us in the process. And I think it'd be unfair to a superintendent to do all of the strategic planning and then say, hey, here you go.
Process on him.
So I kind of like that idea of starting to work on the strategic plan and hiring a superintendent, but then moving with them through it so that they have ownership and investment in it, which is a very different way. So I feel like there's a middle piece that I'm feeling.
That very well could be true. I think over the course, over a lot of these candidates, I suspect, will have come from or worked in districts where they had strategic plans in place. So I don't think they're gonna come in completely unfamiliar with the concept. So I'm really torn. This is a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other for me in terms of whether we should attack the strategic plan first and the soup search secondly, or the other way around, or something of a hybrid.
I mean, what you could do, like I said, I think that we can do in-house as well as anybody else. I think, in fact, we can probably do a better job. What you could do is you could start the meetings with the superintendent search, because that's one that has a definite timeline. I mean,
Right.
that is, you want to have a superintendent on board by mid-February, if at all possible. So that one is truly one to start now. And then once you're at that process, then you could, continue on, as Dr. Neeraj was saying. But you can get a lot of the legwork done in advance. In other words, when you're meeting with groups, ask them the questions at the same time. Now, I've heard, everybody mentioned surveys, and of course, I've heard from Christine that, maybe that we were survey saturated a little bit, at least in the recent past, but you know, you can work with a company like School Perceptions to come up with, you know, the type of surveys that answer both questions, send it out to publics. So, I mean, if you wanted to, you could start with the superintendent search, because that does have, that one you need to get going on.
I think whichever one we do first, whichever one we do second is secondary right now. My question to you would be, are you willing to lead us through this year attacking both of these projects, both the superintendent search and the strategic plan? And if you are, you know, if you have the willingness to do that, can we get all this done?
Well, I would think, you know, in.
We're gotta be
listening-
getting up against the.
Yeah, in listening to what, you know, has been said, and I would say, what we could start with is, we'd start with the superintendent search.
Mhm.
I would say you're gonna hold lots of focus groups with that. When you do the focus groups, ask them the questions on both subjects. Ask them the questions on what they would you want the board to look for in the next superintendent. Ask them also the questions, what they would like to see. You can start gathering that information. Once you have the superintendent on board, then you can go with what I'll call coalescing the information. Even as Dr. Neerad said, is that, you know, you don't write it, WASB doesn't write it. You know, basically the administrative team writes it. Fortunately, I like to write, so, and I'm used to doing this, so collating the information, giving it to you, saying, okay, here's what it looks like. Do you agree with this? What changes you want to make and go for that? So, do I think it's possible? Yes. I would start, you know, like I said, I think the gathering information, you're gonna have the meetings anyway.
Why don't we kind of attack it this way? Let's decide, I guess, first and foremost, whether we want to use an outside agency to do this, one or both, or do we want to keep it in-house?
Well, can I make a comment first? Because
Please.
I'm really open to being persuaded, but I don't agree with what you're saying, Christine. To me, I'm thinking, when I was a teacher, I wouldn't know what I'm looking for in a superintendent. I'm looking for a good leader. What does that mean?
Yeah.
There's a part of me, I'm also looking for continuity in this district. What I'm frightened is if we're just kind of, for lack of a better term, willy-nilly, we don't really have a strategic plan, this person comes in and tells us what we need. That bothers me, because I having been in this district as long as I have, and I think there's a lot of good things. I think we can also, quite honestly, fairly say there's things that we really need to work on. I think we can do that in-house. But there's a part of me feels like, again, and I was trying to get to that when I was talking to, you know, Dan, it was just the idea that I kind of would like the person, whoever he or she is, to say, I like where you are going, and I feel comfortable, and I'd like to stay here. I mean, I'd like to see this thing develop, as opposed to, okay, I've got a free canvas here, and I'm going to paint what I want, and I've done it, and I'm out of here. That's my only concern, and I don't know how, you know, other people feel about it. And as I said, I'm open, so if you can convince me otherwise, that's fine. But I have more reservations on not being involved. I'd like to try to get as much of the strategic plan in some ways done, that survey and whatnot. And I thought it was you, Kate, who mentioned that parents are just going like, oh my gosh, we got another survey.
So,
if you can do them all at the same time, I'm thinking like,
yeah.
this is good.
So what I did like, I mean, I think we've heard from two different groups who have both kind of suggested similar ideas in, as far as what we attack first. But what I liked with WASB was that they mentioned, like, here's the things we can do together right off the board, so that even if we focus, whether we go with an outside group or not, even if we're focusing on the superintendent search first, we're still starting that strategic planning process. I mean, I personally feel like I understand what they're saying when they say you want to find a superintendent who has ideas. This is going to be a plan that we're asking them essentially to put in place, right? They're the ones that are going to be really striving to make the strategic plan work in the next 3 to 5 years. So you want to make sure that we don't do all of these things and then they come in and just can't execute what we've planned. And so that's why I do like the idea of starting the process kind of combined, but then waiting on finalizing it until we have a superintendent in place. That's my feeling. It made sense when he was talking about that. But what I did like is the survey part. I think we need to coordinate that. Regardless of what we decide, we need to coordinate it so that we're sending out one survey and then trying to do our focus groups, at least initially, to combine both.
I think we have to, if we're gonna try to do it in 1 year.
I do too.
Yeah.
Well, that was,
And I have a question about that. Where is it, this sounds like, where is it said that? Where is it said that we have to finish them both in this year?
it doesn't.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
What we need to finish in this year
Is
is
the
the
superintendent.
superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss,
No.
like,
Yeah.
we passed that it had to be done by
No.
next year, like.
No.
Okay,
No.
so the superintendent is a given, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all
And you
right.
wanna get started with it soon.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Christine, don't get me wrong on that. I just feel like if you're gonna
Yeah.
get the best candidate to be our superintendent, I think it behooves us in some ways to kind of know what we're looking for or where we're going,
Sure.
so we can find that person.
Well, I think by the time you have your interviews,
We'll-
is that you'll have enough information from groups coming in where you'll have a feeling of, where people think they would like you to go in the next couple of years. I mean, you won't have it all written out, it won't be with all of the, basically here are the goals and measure how you'll be able, but you'll have a sense of where individuals think you should go.
Well, I also feel like in some ways, you've been here now, what, 4 months? Not quite?
No, I don't know, what?
No,
Ish.
not, 2.5,
August, September.
2.5.
Well, but I mean,
Well,
you already started
3
some
months
contact.
probably, right?
Yeah, and so my feeling is, in some ways, I think you already are beginning to get that sense of, what we do well, what we need to work on, where there seems to be, an interest that we need to be going. And I think, in a sense, we should take advantage even of that, in
Mhm.
some ways. That's the one reason why I start thinking it'd be nice to go in-house.
It's kind of an all of the eggs in one basket sort of proposition as well. Arlen, what are you thinking? I'd like to hear from you.
I think I like to look at them parallel, whether they go the same pace or not. I don't think it's that important. I think the superintendent is something that's relevant and has a timeline that we want to get accomplished. And we're going to want somebody that's open-minded, that's going to be able to come in here, because he's going to make this his new home. Now, if he
Or
can't.
she, they.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it.
It'll come.
It wasn't meant in
You
that
could say
intention.
they will come in.
They will come in, how's that? Wow, now I gotta slow down and think about every word. But anyway.
Well, I don't think we've ever had
there-
a female superintendent in the
No.
district, have we? So it's
Yeah, we
easy,
know
it's
you
easy.
were
And
saying
I
all
don't, I
It's
have
easy
no,
to default to
Yeah, there-
that,
there's-
so,
yeah,
yeah,
that-
yeah, we get it.
there's a lot of good people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but anyway, they have to be open-minded. Anybody that's gonna be taking that job has to be open-minded to whatever that district is living right now. You're coming into their home, their school is their home. And does it need some reorganization? Yes, the people there wanna change their direction. They want to chart, but like everybody says, this is gonna be community-driven. That, and anybody that's gonna be of any equity as a leader is going to move the team the direction they want to go, and where, because they're there to facilitate that. No matter who you hire, they gotta have the quality to look at it and go, we are the customer, we are the ones that are asking, this is the direction, that has to happen. I don't, I think when we go through a process, I think we're gonna air out a whole bunch of things, but I think it's gonna zoom down into some real strong points. And they gotta be something that has meaningful, that we base our decisions off of, and everybody bases it and puts this group back into a tight team. They're right here and we're gonna go this way. And a good leader is like any coach. He's gonna get behind it and go, we're gonna go through our strengths and we're gonna put it here and we're gonna go. So I think, you know, we have to look at the superintendent. I think a good superintendent we're gonna get is gonna be able to step in here and take the district the direction that we want to go. And, because they have to. If they're not, we're not gonna want them, because they're gonna say things that we're not gonna agree with, and they probably won't be chosen. But people open up and talk, and they listen, and they'll show their interests, their abilities, and we kind of work from there. I think it can be done if we got the structure to do it. And I think it's just plain, it's a game plan. You get a game plan, you put it together, and the first thing you do, you put it on paper, and away you go. You don't do that, we ain't going anywhere, and we're gonna have a plan, and you go forward. And the community will respond, everybody will be walking together, and away we go. I think it can be handled. It's a big deal. I'm not sure if the strategic plan will get done like before the superintendent, but, because that is a big deal. It took a long time before, a long time, but that was, I believe, probably one of the first times we've done it in this district, and set that mission statement and what we were talking about and what we were, our direction. And we took a lot of people, 40-some people, they were opposites, put them together to make it happen. Now, we're gonna not necessarily take opposites, we're gonna just take people that are applying to want to participate, and we're going to look at that and make up a great community team. I think it'll come. I think we should work along with the superintendent parallel, and one will probably go quicker than the other one. And if we got a good person, they're going to shine. And I think we're a very good district that's well known in many places. And like Bruce says, you have the McFarland way, and you know what? Every town has its way. We got a pretty good team here. We got a great community that their number one focus is these schools. We're sitting here because of these people believe in us to move this school. And everybody, retired, new people, anybody you talk to, will know what this district's about. And that's why they live here, and that's why they respect it. And our kids show it too. So I think we can do it. But we heard, you know, 2 different presentations. We're lucky enough to have a seasoned superintendent filling in for us. It's an option that we've never had before. And I think it was worth every bit of it to see what we can accomplish in multiple ways. There's 3 facets we could look at. So that's my long-winded
Thank you.
explanation. Sorry.
Do we think we can decide this evening whether or not we are going to bring someone in from the outside or handle this in-house? Do people feel like they're in a position to decide that one way or another?
I feel like I could. I do have a few concerns, but if other people want to ask or just answer that question. I
Bruce?
feel like I have enough information to make a decision,
Yeah.
is what I'm
Decision.
I
saying.
do too.
yeah.
I guess I'd like to hear what your thoughts all are on, I mean, we do have an interim superintendent who can definitely assist us, which is huge. I mean, we heard from 2 different firms that I
3.
think,
We
or
heard
3,
CISA.
that's right,
Mhm.
3
We heard
different
from
firms
CISA,
that I
yeah.
think bring different things to the table. I mean, I can go first. From a superintendent search perspective, I think we may be able to do that in-house. I do see the benefits of hiring somebody, but at the same time, I think if we kind of did this hand in hand, I can see the possibilities of doing it in-house. What concerns me is I'd love to pair the superintendent search with the strategic planning, at least from a survey perspective. And I don't know that we can get to where I would hope we could get on the strategic plan before Dr. Anderson leaves. And then that leaves us with a new superintendent and us trying to finalize the strategic plan together, possibly without Dr. Anderson. And that's a big concern of mine.
Well, what I could tell you is that, let's say that was the case, I would finish, I would stay on long enough until your plan was done.
Okay. That's good.
I wouldn't leave you in the lurch.
Okay.
I wouldn't leave you and then, oh, it's done. It
Well, I
would be
guess that
finished.
answers that.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's nice that we've got you under our thumb for an unlimited amount of time. That's good.
I didn't
Bruce?
say unlimited.
Yeah.
No, I tend to be a Buddhist. So what Christine said, I think this hybrid, I think it's gonna have to be that way. I don't see any option. I think you have to get the superintendent, but I was thinking what, Arlen said, I think for a person to really be happy here, they should kind of know where we're going. And they want to know, is this a good fit for me? Whoever that person is.
Mhm.
In a sense, that's where the strategic plan, I just can't help but ask you, and this is off the point, but like, why did you mention the strategic plan? It's like, I think our first board meeting, and you must have seen there, it's like,
Well,
we've.
I just know that in leading districts in the past, is that if you have an idea of where you want to go, and the reason I said it has to be short is I've been involved in the plans that have taken all year, that created in binders, that nothing happened. And it left people with this bad taste in their mouth, it left people, saying I invested all this time, nothing happened. So I've worked on it where it's been, like I said, something that's easily understandable. But I know that if you have that, then all right, here are at least the main goals that we would like to accomplish during the next 3 to 5 years. And here's how we're gonna know if we're gonna get there. And if you have that, then you see progress reaching those goals, because they, first, they represent where it is you've already decided you'd like to go. You've got measurable benchmarks to determine if you're getting there. And then it helps you focus your personnel, focus your finances. And if you don't have that, you can drift. And one of the things that I made a commitment to the staff during the opening days for professional development. The biggest complaint on professional development is that districts go to the flavor of the day. In other words, there's always something new around the corner, but you don't get buy-in, because pretty soon staff members, I'm not talking about you, Bruce, but a staff member will say, look, what difference does it make? Because next year, they're going to come up with something different and new, and we're never seeing something through. So I made the commitment that whatever we would go with, we would see it through to its completion. So at least for the next couple of years, it was in the administrative team had the same discussion. It wasn't going to be, if we go with this, then we commit to this until we've reached the, till we've completed the process.
And that resonated with me, because that's how I coached and taught. I had to have an objective. This is what I'm going to be doing. And I get my assistant coaches or my students.
And I've done this in my
seeing
last 2 districts, so it's hard for me to tell you to spend money on something that I know you don't have to spend money on.
Well, I think that should be another consideration. And I want to just say that I am so impressed with you, all of you. I think we have a really nice group of individuals, all coming with different perspectives, but I think we all can add to that kind of the strategic plan and where are our weaknesses, what are the things we've done in the past that are good, and that's why I really feel like we can do this. I think we have a lot of good people.
Can I play the role of the bee in the bonnet like I always do?
Yes, you may.
The thorn in the side?
We'd be disappointed if you did.
Well, first of all, I was not blown away by any of the presentations or the ones that you gave us to read. I think that they all kind of came across and they presented really well, but I did walk away with all of them feeling like, a little disappointed. So I am feeling like, is it worth the money? Definitely. Are we going to get anything? So So I think we're all kind of going the same way, but let me tell you my concerns. Some of the things is just, are we going to be able to be objective? Because if we were working with a company, they would gather the data, they would gather the survey data, they would present it to us, and it's kind of like, hey, you've got some good things you're doing and you've got some bad things you're doing, and this is what it is. We're gonna have to hear that. We're gonna have to be very objective and say, you know, there are great things about this district, but we're gonna be hearing some really bad things, and what are we gonna be able to hear that and do something with that? The other thing is that we often, and I've said this in other meetings, there is this, you know, tradition of McFarland that we all try to fit into, and I think in some ways that's really good, but in some ways that doesn't let us grow, and our demographics are changing, and we need to change with other things too. So if we look for somebody that fits in, that's just another way of saying, you know, are they going to perpetuate everything, not look at things either more critically or anything like that? And it's often a euphemism for not accepting people who are different than what's traditionally been.
New leaders have to take a critical view,
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
in order to do their jobs correctly.
And then the third comment I would make would be, I have not either been impressed. There's a lot of great practices that are really simple to increase equity, like creating the rubric before you look at the candidates. So I would ask us as a team, if we're going to do this, to learn about a couple of those. And I'm not talking about 8 hours of PD, but just some really good practices about ensuring that we're thinking about this. And I would just want us to kind of commit to thinking about and doing some of those things if we're going to engage with Wayne and do it.
I agree. I think we've already committed to that, you know,
Yeah.
a while back.
Yeah.
That we're gonna, this equity and inclusion and tolerance is gonna be a part of
Well, no,
everything that we do.
I'm talking about our own practices when we hire.
Oh, I see.
As we're
So
looking
like,
at
like
candidates.
Okay.
you should have your rubric and your interview questions way before you see any candidate.
I gotcha.
Otherwise you change it based on who you see.
Yeah, that's,
And
And
so,
that-
You're right.
so I'm just the simple things like that,
Yeah.
that we could do, and so,
But that's my point. I think we have people on this board who are gonna lead us.
yeah,
I
well.
think that's something that that's your expertise.
Well, thank you, but my point is, if I would have heard a lot of that, then I would have been like, great. You
Yeah.
teach us more, or you
Yeah.
teach us,
Yeah.
or you teach us how to do this, and I'm not necessarily convinced that they would, although, I mean, both groups had lots of positives, but I think, yeah, I'll be quiet.
Please don't take this the wrong way, but to me, that is what I have found in all my years at McFarland. That there's someone we've got good folks here, and they see exactly what you're seeing. And I think you have that gift. I think that's really valuable.
Well, like I said, my biggest concern is making sure that we go into this process very objective as we talk to community, parents, students, so
Yeah.
that when we're not replicating what's good and we're fixing what's bad.
Yep.
right.
Well, and I think one of the benefits of Dr. Anderson helping us with that is that he hasn't been in the district very long. So as far as helping to conduct the search and then move forward with strategic planning, like there's not this deep felt tradition, you know, that maybe other people might have. So I think that can benefit us in just finding the candidates. But I completely agree with you that we can do a lot of this ahead of time before we ever look at a candidate packet.
Yep.
We should be creating that rubric so that we're not changing it to fit the candidates that apply.
The key to both is you have to listen. And that's not here. I mean, people are going to tell you things, and you need, so what is it they've told you? And then you never ask somebody's opinion if you're not willing to use it. So I think, you know, and this is for both, that really is the nexus, how they fit together, is that you're listening to people, and as you listen to them, you will find out, because you are representatives of the community. That's why you get elected. And so the more of the community that you hear and put their viewpoints together, you'll be able to know, here are things we should look for either in the person we want to come to lead the district or in where we want the district to go in the future.
And that's what I thought was, for me, it was really fascinating to go through the last strategic plan we made, because there was, everybody had their voice put in. And then you could actually watch strong discussion, and all of a sudden, things kind of lapped together, and you watch this whole room of people just come boom, 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 and they put it home. And it did this district a wonder of good. Our problem was we didn't tweak it many times, and I think that's why we're here, and that's really a good thing that you have a plan, that you always are looking at what's changed, and you have to adapt. And I think that
Boy.
that was done a year before, so it'd be like 94.
I think.
Yeah, year before I
A
got
couple
on.
of years ago.
But I tell you, this community, it was. It
Got
was,
the big
you
eyes
had-
from
You
Christine.
had 40-some people in there, but you know what? When they got done, they was just like this. And this district took off, the kids took off, and you had a game plan. But all game plans got to be tweaked every year, maybe a little bit, and that needed to be structured in there, and it
Yep.
wasn't structured in there. We ran for a long time, but we need to have that re-evaluation and a consistent, because time changes, people change, and situations change.
The landscape around public education has changed just a bit since
Yep.
1994.
Yeah.
No, that's for sure. Well, then, hearing that,
I mean, the only thing I would ask, before is that, first, I'm more than happy to lead you in one or both of them. That's, I've done it before, I have no problem doing it. It will require extra time for some of your individuals, and I would ask that you give them a stipend at the end of the process for the extra things that they're going to do that they won't. It'll still be considerably less than whatever you were going to pay the lowest price.
I
But
think
don't want anything-
historically we've done that.
Yeah.
We've
And I just
rewarded.
think that would be fair to them, because there will be
Yep.
people that I tap,
Yep.
even while I'm gone, to take on responsibilities just with the superintendent search, because you don't need to wait till I come back. I can have things that people, can start doing even when I'm not here. And I just think that would be a nice gesture.
Yeah, I agree. Do we want to put this in the form of a motion in terms of staying in-house as opposed to hiring from outside?
Can I ask, is everybody comfortable? Or what's your biggest question, I guess, on if you have an issue that you'd like to air out and talk it, now's a good time to do it, and then it'll help drive our decision-making. It's just got to be honest to one another.
Well, Kate asked a very important question. What happens you get to the end and we're not quite there? And, Dr. Anderson has already answered that. And certainly, Christine, you've got so much knowledge that we're going to be tapping into. So-
Well, and I prefer, I agree with you, Wayne, that money could go towards that. And
Yeah.
that to me is far more valuable. than
Absolutely.
what I think we're gonna get.
So-
Yeah,
Yep.
and rewarding the people that are part of the district that want to
Yep.
assist in this.
Yeah, I mean, it should go to them. So I'm always honest. I haven't said anything I wasn't feeling, so.
Good.
Okay.
That's important. And that's important for all of us to know. I hope everybody we got to be honest.
Yeah. Everyone else feeling similar?
I
Bruce?
feel similar.
Yes, I
They-
do.
Kate,
Yeah, I'm okay with this.
somebody want to make a motion then?
I'll make the motion.
Go ahead.
I'd make the motion that Dr. Anderson lead us in both the superintendent search and the strategic plan. I guess we put it in that order.
That's fine.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
You're right, and so since we'll have it on next Monday's agenda, we'll start giving the timeline that we'll start looking at. And I don't want to call it your assignments, but at least so you have an idea of what we're going to be doing over the next couple months.
And we get you set up with a little cot somewhere in the corner back there,
That is the nice thing about only being an hour from home.
little dorm fridge maybe.
And I did put an electric door on my chicken coop. So it goes up and down and up. I'm hoping it worked. It worked this morning.
Okay.
I'm hoping it worked tonight.
Dr. Anderson, did you want to bring anybody up to date on any of the other items in your minutes before we look for an adjournment?
No, I don't think so. I think we're meeting next Monday, so it's not going to be
Yes.
too much
Yep.
longer until we meet again.
And I might just remind those who might be able to make it that a week from Friday on the 24th,
Yes.
Ann Nichols, we're going to have a presentation here. Dr. Holly, from 8 to 11 on Friday morning is what it means to be a culturally and linguistically responsive school.
Can I, I'm sorry, can I just ask a question about this?
Yes.
There's been some talk, and I agree, of offering at least a Zoom link or something for some of the community that maybe can't come. And I know personally I won't be in town. It would be great to be able to access this virtually.
Well,
If
we
that's
are
an
talking
option.
with Dr. Holly whether or not we can tape it so people can watch
That'd be
it.
really good. I have
Okay.
to go to a goat seminar.
So,
Hey, we've all got our priorities. I'm telling
I'll be
you,
in Door County, but-
we don't want goats.
and just, and, you
We
know,
don't want
just,
unhappy goats.
just as reminders that, you know, this is one of the staff in-services. We just wanted to make, and one of the, as
Yep.
we had the discussion, we said, you know, it would be nice if we allowed community members who had an interest to hear some of the discussions, so at least they would have an idea of here's the thing. So that was where we came up with inviting interested individuals. So I don't know that we'll have a Zoom link, but we
Okay.
are asking if we can get it taped
Okay,
so that we can provide the tape message for people to view.
okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I understand that Dr. Holly might have some, you know, concerns about that, but I think if it's, I mean, the context is, if we're talking about being responsive, accommodating, and equitable, that this is a way to accommodate people. And so I would hope that he would understand that and that he would be willing to do it for that, and that we can assure
Oh, he may
him-
be uncomfortable with it getting taped, you mean?
Well, you know, I mean,
That's possible.
his is
Yeah.
a business.
Yeah.
You know, so, I
Oh,
mean, I
yeah.
think there's, and I don't want to speak for him.
I
but
understand.
Having for others is that they're saying, if you tape this, or if you know, then what prevents Mount Horeb
Oh, yeah.
from saying, geez, we do not need to pay this big, we just pay the tape and you'll get the same type
Mhm.
of things, and we've
Oh.
saved several $1,000s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's understood.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and if it's not able to be taped, the Zoom could be a secondary
Yeah.
way, because
Yep.
then it's
So-
not taped.
Mhm.
I mean, so we are taking a look at it more for the community, not for our staff members, because the staff, you know, they would be here and we have plenty of space.
Yep.
You know, and they were here for opening day. So, but for outside, we are taking a look at it. You know, I'm hopeful.
Mhm.
Okay.
Which was my thing this morning. But I don't want to make a commitment that I don't know the true answer to yet.
No, that's great. Okay. All right, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I move to
Arlen?
adjourn.
I'll second.
Christine, second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
All right, well, I will see you all next Monday, if not before that.
All right.